Greetings, my name is Schnella, and I'm going to talk about how good Sul'thraze actually is. So when I'm going to start this video, you're obviously going to be under the impression that yes, I'm going to say Sul'thraze is completely overpowered. And you are correct, the weapon in general is very strong, but that does leave us with a very strange question. Is it better than, for example, Apollyon when we are going into actual PvE? When we take a look at it from a PvP perspective, there is a clear winner here. Sul'thraze is the absolute winner because its item level does not matter. In this case, the proc is all that really matters, and let it be known, the proc is obviously going to carry you into the victory of the battle. It deals a lot of damage and it makes your target do less damage to you. Seems like a perfect combination which you obviously cannot leave behind. So when taking this into pure PvP perspectives, then there is no question about it. The proc of this weapon is the one that makes the difference between a kill or not. Of course, if wearing Apollyon you will do more general damage, but the proc is basically what is carrying you way more than anything else. In fact, the proc is so strong that whenever you are fighting, for example, a rogue or many other people, then non-critical damaging hits will usually not damage you at all, and their crits will be halved, if not even more. Of course, abilities will not be affected as much by these, but the general consensus stays that the auto attack, which is in many cases of many classes a lot of their damage, they are negated by this debuff. This of course leaves you in a great advantage in both duels and 1v1s, but as well in battlegrounds, as there is one target less doing a lot of damage to you or any of your friends, because this doesn't only affect you, but the person that has a debuff will do less damage to anyone in general. And a lot of people are also focusing on AoE damage, which is already much lower target per target, so you see where I'm going with this. In PvP, this weapon is undeniably much stronger, but in PvE, we are having several difficulties finding out, is Sul'thraze stronger, or is it not? Now there are several factors that I'm going to look into this, and item level is desperately one of them, but I'm going to leave that up to the end to make the point completely clear. First of all, we're going to take a look at the differences. The difference between Sul'thraze and Apollyon is 4.9 weapon damage, DPS, weapon DPS, 24 strength, 27 critical strike, 5 haste, and you gain 1.3% versatility. Now of course you do have the proc as a difference between the two, but I'm going to leave the proc out of this right now because I already know how much the proc does in my average damage. If I go into a dungeon or a raid on my warrior and I use Sul'thraze, then 5% of my damage is done purely by Sul'thraze. So we're going to keep that in mind. Now I'm going to remove the proc of Sul'thraze entirely and take a look at how much the damage difference is between the two weapons. Now, I am assuming that you have Apollyon and the best in slot gems, which you only get from dungeons. But assuming you have these, then the difference, as I said before, applies. 24 strength, 27 crit, 5 haste, 4.9 weapon damage, and you gain 1.3% versatility. If we compare these two on an outdoor world comparison, then Sul'thraze will do 10% less damage than Apollyon would. But of course you have the proc addition to this, which is 5%, and if I were to add the proc, then the difference would be a 6% total, because there's a small inclination there, because 90%. I think you get what I mean. The main point stands. Without proc, there's a 10% difference. With the proc, there's a 6% difference between using Sul'thraze and Apollyon. But the proc is still useful, right? Because it reduces the damage taken by the tank. And yes, it does. When the proc happens, the tank takes less damage. Is this damage substantial? In PvP, it would be. In PvE, not really. Unless you're fighting lower mobs, mobs which do not do a high amount of damage, and I'm talking about non-bosses, then yes, the damage would be noticeable, except you're usually fighting multiple trash mobs, and thus the difference is really not that big. The main thing is, if you are a tank and you're using this for the proc, you're making even a bigger mistake, because you are losing out on, well, you gain the 0.65% versatility, but you are losing out on that 4.5 item level, which is 4% less damage taken, which you could have had from the item level. Now, as we know how item level right now works, it's in a very complex system. Oh, well, it's not very complex, it's in a very weird system where Blizzard has been forgetting about the system existing in the first place. And I'm going to make a video on that in the future eventually, but right now I'm going to focus mainly on the difference between the weapons. So as it stands, Apollyon is 4.5 item levels higher. If we take this into numbers, then obviously we have to take the 4.5, we're going to round it down, so we have 4. If we do that times 1.66%, as it would be, then Apollyon has an extra 6.66 recurring percent more damage done than it already has compared to Sul'thraze. This makes the difference between them even bigger. So outdoors, the difference is 10% without proc or 6% with proc. I'm going to be using the full with proc now. The difference is 6% with proc outdoors. Whilst going indoors, your Apollyon gets an extra 6.66% more damage done, which makes the difference between the two 11%. So when going inside a dungeon or a raid, Apollyon beats out by 11% more damage done, and you get 3.3% less damage taken as well from the item level. So that's where it stands. Sul'thraze, as much as it is a good weapon for PvP, unfortunately for PvE, it is not your best choice. Is it good? Yes. Is it perfect? No. Will it help your tank? Sure, a little bit, but not a lot, because bosses will deal a lot of damage nevertheless. An average hit can take up to 1.5k, maybe 2.5k, and then we are being generous. Well, reducing that by 300, it sounds a lot, but it's not going to make the difference of a world, especially when you consider you could just have killed the boss a lot faster. So there you have it. Choosing Sul'thraze for PvP? Go for it. Would I want it nerfed? Absolutely. Choosing Sul'thraze for PvE? Unfortunately, you've made a mistake there, and I would advise going for Apollyon instead. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.